I'm looking at a massive ego test because I'm starting on board and the fact I couldn't think what to put in the first slide. So I put my name up, but I've also just noticed there that I didn't capitalise content and senior content producer. So it looks like I'm telling you all that I'm a senior, kind of quite a happy producer, which I suppose I sort of am. Okay, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, how I came to work at the BBC. I'll tell you a little bit about one of the programmes that we made, specifically a programme this week, and just a bit about the decision making that went into that. And also I'll be taking questions, any questions you want at the end of this. This is one thing, is I'll be absolutely as honest as I can with everybody. I'll probably be a bit moany at certain points. It's sort of like almost like a journalistic privilege thing. Whatever I say only stays between these four walls, so let's say you can't ask me anything you want. One thing I was saying to Chris, however, is that although that looks like an awesome title, like I'm Mr. Super Important from the BBC, the actual reality is I'm a sort of middle manager on a regional radio station. So although you can ask me anything you want at the BBC, I'm not actually the BBC. I'm just a guy I happen to work for, quite low down actually. However, I'll explain how did I get to be the senior content producer of all these programmes. Go on, thanks. Go on. Right. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what I do is I work in radio. Senior content producer, I work across all the morning programmes on BBC Radio Scotland. Do the Kay Adams programme between Monday and Thursday, that's 9 to 12. Stephen Jardine, which is today, he was on air as I left Glasgow today. And then I look after a Saturday programme called the Shireen Nanjani programme. All these programmes are all completely speech programmes, okay? So that's what I do. I look after radio, I look after speech. How did I get to be in this job? I was kind of thinking about this on the train on the way down. And the truth is, it was probably a decision, rightly or wrongly, that I made in 1984. Which was, I was revising for my prelim exams in 1984. I'd already applied to go to university. I was going to go to university and study chemistry. And I was sitting at home on this morning, it was a February morning probably, and I was thinking, right, what am I going to do? I could do my revision for history, or I could do my revision for physics, because I was doing physics as well. I thought, right, I'll do the physics, and I'll get that out of the way, and I'll look forward to the afternoon, I'll start doing my history revision. And it was at one of these kind of weird moments, I thought, well, why am I studying? Why have I applied to go to university to study chemistry when I don't really like it? In actual fact, what I prefer doing is history. So I had this, if you want to say, an epiphany, and I said, I'm not going to go to university to do chemistry. I changed my mind, went to see a careers officer and said, you know, I'm just going to do what I fancy. I'm just going to do stuff that I like doing. And for some reason, that careers officer said, yeah, that's a good idea, Stephen, you should just do that. Don't do stuff you don't want to do. So didn't go and do that, chemistry. I went to university and I studied politics. Was it 4 years, did an honours degree, got a 2-1, did awesome, left university, and I was totally unemployable. Didn't have a job. You guys are way ahead of me because you've got much more focus on what you want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a sort of hazy notion that I was going to do something in housing. I was quite a serious person in those days. I was quite passionate about things, but it wasn't enough to get me a job. So I was unemployed for quite a long time. Although when I say I was unemployed, I was actually working as a painter decorator, but I was also signing on at the same time because it meant it didn't stop my housing benefit, which meant I had no particular inclination to get a proper job. So I was actually completely unemployed for a whole year. And back in those days, if you're unemployed for a whole year at any one time, you get sent for retraining. So I get sent for retraining, which basically meant sitting in a weir, it was a bus depot in Knightswood in Glasgow, and you had to sit with all these other people who'd been unemployed for a year. None of who were truly unemployed, everybody probably had a job they could be at. However, you went there, they taught you how to write your name, and how to fill out an application form, and loads of stuff that I could easily have done. But at the end of it, the course, this 1 week course you had to go on, job plan workshop it was called, the guy who ran it said, you have to go and do training. I was like, what do you mean training? They said, no, you have to go and do training. I didn't want to do it because my logic was, I've got loads of jobs that I could be going and doing. You know, I've been painting and decorating. I have loads of money. He said, no, you have to do it. He said, look, Stephen, you're a smart guy. there's this thing that they run at the BBC. It's a training course for unemployed people. Go and try it. I don't care what you do, but if you go for 1 week, just complete 1 week and you leave it, that's fine. There's a box ticked. So I agreed to go and do that course. I had no particular inclination to go. I never thought about working at the BBC, simply because I didn't think people in me worked at the BBC. I thought it was really smart, intelligent, articulate, full of themselves. People probably went to a much better school than me. I thought that's who worked at the BBC, didn't think it was me. I went and did that course, and the first week we were there, they gave us recording equipment, which was massive, by the way. You had to go out in the street, you had to interview people, you had to make vox pops, edit them, go back. It was about ideas, and honestly, after 1 week, there was no danger I was going back to be a painted decorator. I totally loved it. And most of the people in that course have been unemployed for a year. Most of them didn't come back, or they all disappeared. I went every single day. At the end of that, they got me a work placement within the BBC. I spent 1 week with the news department. This was back in 1994 then. I spent it was a 1 month, with the news department. I went in, worked with them. Now, back in those days, the BBC News, there was no security passes to get in anywhere. So you could just come in off the street. I spent 1 month with them, 1 month. I recognised that they were completely disorganised. They didn't know who was who or who was doing anything. So at the end of the month, I'll just keep coming in, right? So I just kept coming in, so they got to know me. We just sit down and say, oh, who's going to do this and cover up? I'll do that, that's great. And it got to Christmas time and they were sorting out who's going to come in over Christmas, New Year. Steve, and you'll come in. I go, yeah, I'll come in. I said, it'd be good if you could pay me. And they're like, are we not paying you? I said, no, nobody's paid me. I said, that's fine, we'll sort that out. So it was a freelance contract, which kind of meant you just get paid for the hours you came in. It wasn't a great contract, but at that time it was awesome. And you got a paycheck with the BBC written on it. It was brilliant, I was really proud. So I just started doing odd jobs there. Applied for jobs in other departments, which I got. But it was in the first few years, it was basically just pick up whatever you can. If somebody asks you to do something, you do it. I got my first proper job working in a weird department, which it was called Weekend Programmes, but they also did this programme in that called Off the Ball, which is a radio programme. It's one of the longest running programmes we've got, which is still on now. And despite the fact that I was a very earnest young man, I loved football and I loved comedy. So I worked in that. It's a programme we still do, which is presented by Stuart Cosgrove and Tam Cowan. And I got a proper job doing that. And then I've bumped around doing loads and loads of different things until I've ended up being the senior content producer of general programmes and looking after all these things. And as actually Chris noticed earlier, I work 6 days a week. That's how important I am. It's great fun. So that's how I got to be at the BBC. Now, I'm going to be your senior producer, okay? So what I'm trying to do is explain a little bit about the decision-making process we have for our programme. And hopefully what we'll explain is how this mess became a radio programme. So this kind of looks a bit like a crime scene almost. It's a grimy picture. But this is part of the decision-making process. Now, revisiting the programme that we made on Monday. So this is this Monday's programme. What we do is we go in at 6 o'clock in the morning, you read as many newspapers as you possibly can, and you look online, you look at what the scripts of other programmes are doing, and then you write on the board what you think might potentially make a phone-in. Now, I didn't produce Monday's programme, I was the senior on that programme, which means I'm sort of in charge of all the programmes, so I was in charge of the next day's programme as well. There's a guy called Stevie. So this is what we started with. Okay, so hopefully what we're going to try and do is explain exactly how the decision process we went through to finally get a programme. Let's skip the next one. Okay, so at the end of that, I'm going to explain a little bit about the stories and give you some context. And at the end of that, in just about a minute's time or so, I'll ask you which ones you would most likely to hear. Okay, first of all, did anybody listen to the Kay Adams programme Phone In at 9 o'clock this Monday morning? Right. I didn't expect any of you to say yes. It's good you didn't listen to it. One, because it would ruin the excitement and fun of finding out what we did to it. And two, because it's not for you, okay? It's not. You're not the target demographic. Okay, so we've got these various different stories. I'll explain a little bit about them. First one, fixed rooms. Shooting gallery, do you welcome this new move? Now, that was a recommendation that came out on Monday, that's almost certainly going to happen in Glasgow. They will have what's called fixed rooms, okay, and also they're known as shooting galleries. They've got them in various different countries, but it's where intravenous drug users can go and take drugs in a safe, hygienic, supervised environment. The idea is to take drug users off the streets, so you don't have people taking drugs on the street. It's also so you don't have needles lying around the street, but it's also potentially if people OD, there's somebody to look after them. So what we've done with all these ones is we do this very quickly, okay? Is we just we'll do a quick question under it. So the question we've written there is, do you welcome this new move? So if we were asking that of the audience, that's what we push out to them and see what they'd say. Next one down, Clinton versus Trump, do you care? Now, there's so much stuff, I don't know if you remember over the weekend, it was last Friday night, it's interesting, every Friday something interesting seems to happen in the US presidential race, which is great if you're writing Saturday and Sunday papers. So, the stuff about Hillary Clinton being investigated by the FBI, all that was coming out, loads of headlines, spurious polls about Trump being ahead in the polls. So we're asking the listeners, do they care about it? Okay, big story. And I'll be doing more of that over the next week. Another one down here, children become more anxious about world events due to social media. Do we need to talk to our children? Again, this is a survey. It must have been, I can't remember that much about this one. It must have been a credible source. We're asking our listeners, it's a modern phenomenon. Do they care about what the children are doing? Next one down, Gove leaves an 11-year-old child alone. Now, this story was Michael Gove, Tory politician, that he was very high profile during the referendum, the Brexit referendum campaign. A story came out, he had left his 11-year-old son in a B&B on his own overnight, while he was out dancing with his wife, and his son had become upset and gone and asked the staff in the B&B, where's my parents, okay? So, would you leave your child alone? So that's a sort of dilemma, lifestyle dilemma. That was quite a big story Monday. Final one, offensive behaviour at football. Huge response to consultation. Should we repeal the Act? Now, obviously this is an ongoing thing, the offensive behaviour at football. In actual fact, the Act was repealed during the week. On Monday it hadn't been, it was a live talking point. There had been thousands of people, got back to the consultation process at Holyrood. They were going to be debating it on Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday. So that was one worth throwing out to the audience. So that was the choices that we decided we had. Now, one thing actually is, I was going to say actually, we look at all the newspapers and everything, but what I always like actually is we don't limit ourselves just to the newspapers or what happens to be news diaries, is that this isn't a great example of it. It's always really, really keen that producers come up with ideas themselves. They think, what is in there, what is being talked about, and rather than just relying on other sources. So, we've got 5 choices there. Just go with your gut feeling. There's no wrong or right answers. If you wanted to hear a phone in and you care, what would you listen to? What would you phone in about? Who would phone in about fixed rooms and shooting gallery? Who would engage with that? One person there. Okay. Number 2, Clinton versus Trump. Do you care? Would that engage you? Would you think, I'll just keep listening to the radio? Okay, a few more people. 1, 2, 3, 4. Children were anxious about world events due to social media. Do we need to talk to our children more? Will you tune into that? Okay, 1, good. Leaving your children alone at home. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, good. Offensive behaviour at football. Should we repeal the Act? Okay. Oh, there's loads over here. Okay, good. Right, so probably I'd say offensive behaviour at football, leaving your children alone, and Gore and Clinton and Trump are probably round about the same. Right, now, before, to explain a little bit about our decision-making process and how we decided eventually what was going to be the phone in between 9 and 10 o'clock, what was going to be the national conversation, I'll explain a little bit about the remit of the Kay Adams programme. So what is the Kay Adams programme? First of all, this is our billing. You can see if you went online, Kay Adams gets to the heart of the stories making the news, right? That doesn't mean anything. The problem with this is with all these, they all mean the same thing. Nathan's Morning News, this is what comes after us, news, comment and discussion. It's just stuff about news, and the problem is you're only allowed a certain amount of letters for that. So that's the billing. What our actual remit is, if you look, this is the thing that is maybe obvious to people is, though we're out at 9 and 10 o'clock, we're not a news programme, okay? The Kay Adams programme is not a news programme. It's a great get out of jail for us. And that we don't have to do what's news, because very often you find what is the top of the news agenda can be like super dull, and you don't necessarily want to talk about it. It can be stuff about, you know, the GDP, it can be stuff about your balance of payments, it might well be wind farms. So we don't have to do any of those news things. However, the great thing is we're what we call a topical programme, so we can pick and choose what we get, okay? We're not a news programme. We always do a phone-in, right? And this is a historical thing. Radio Scotland's always done a phone-in. So although the programme's on for 3 hours, it's only the first hour is the phone-in. We've always done a phone-in between 9 and 10 o'clock. It's probably the thing that the Kay Adams programme is best known for, okay? It's a phone-in programme. It used to be called Call Kay. A lot of people still call it the Call Kay programme. So we're always a phone-in. One of the most important things is that with any programme these days, it's about, you're not broadcasting at people anymore, it's about a conversation, okay? So yeah, we're a phone-in. Phone-ins are quite old-fashioned. We're almost the last phone-in in Scotland that still exists. There's not even football phone-ins are dying out. But it's about a conversation. So we do phones, that's fine, you get a certain amount through phones, we do tons that comes through text, loads through social media, lots of emails still as well. So it's all about a conversation. Every single thing we do in the programme, you're welcoming the listeners back and their comments as well. So that's what we're known for. It's a big deal for us, it's interactivity with the audience. Other thing we do, this is out with the 9 to 10 slot, we do one-to-one interviews. Big set piece one-to-one interviews. Now, these can be simply engaging stories. So you might find somebody who's been on an epic sort of human interest story, they've been challenged, maybe do an illness or something's happened to the family, some traumatic event, or they've just an incredible story. Big names. So what we try to do is bring big names into the programme. We've got next week Michelle Moan coming onto the programme, who's a big name Scottish business person, used to run a bra company. As big a name as Pauline Cafferty was one that we did. We got a lot of press in as well. So when she came back after suffering the illness, we got her in the programme. And also what we do is people who've been involved in the news, so we get the stories behind the news. And we do news analysis as well. That's essentially, it's explaining what's happening in the news, because very often with the news programmes, they take for granted that everybody knows the exact context of everything and what they're talking about. So just before I left today, I had a chat with somebody and we're doing a thing on vice presidents on Monday's programme. But that's just because people don't know who are the proposed vice presidents. Everybody knows who Clinton is. Everybody knows who Trump is, but who are the vice president candidates? But in actual fact, constitutionally, it's a really important role. They've got massive power. If anything happens to the president, that person will be running the country. And that's happened quite recently. Gerald Ford did it, Lyndon Baines Johnson did it. So that can happen. So we do news analysis, explain the news, and we do lifestyle. So it's a really complicated programme. And by lifestyle, that pretty much means we can do anything we want. We explain the world to our listeners, okay? So they can pick and choose things and things we think are relevant to them, and we just explain the world. So you get something if you listen to the programme. So who are the audience? Right, now this slide's probably not supposed to show you. This is analysis from our latest Radar figures. These used to come out until about a month ago, and they had a big thing printed on them for foreign terrorists only, but they've digitised everything, so they don't have that anymore, so I'll just pretend that I didn't realise. Who are our listeners? This is the best slide, because I didn't do this. It looks really nice. However, if you look at it, the reality is, if you look, this is the age range of our listeners, and you can see we're not getting many people 15 to 24. However, we've got over 65. We've got loads of listeners over 65. Gender is mostly male. The other stuff is not great. If you look at our share and reach, these were rotten figures we had last week, so I'll skip past them, okay? So our audience they do tend to be male. They tend to be older, like 55 plus, right? And because they're male, they tend to only come to the station for news and sport, and they just leave. So they don't stay for a particularly long time. That's the reality of the audience we've got. Now, it's not just males over 55. There's a lot of difference, but we definitely skew towards that. We've also got our target audience, right? This is the people who want to listen. So 45 to 65, now there's only 2 people in this room who fit into that target, which is probably you and me, Chris. Right, so they're old, it probably seems really old to you. See for Radio Scotland, we're like, whoa, 45, that's getting young. However, when we're making programmes for 45 to 65-year-olds, right, I think a lot of the times, because I'll have a chat with everybody who comes into the office and explain what that means, a lot of the times I think people think, oh, 45 plus, like what are they interested in? Slippers, sheds, potted plants. Right, logic is, we've done a lot of analysis into this. 45 plus, right up to 65, what you tend to find is that their perceived interest, or sort of interest they think they have, are 20 years younger than their actual age. So 45-year-olds think, yeah, I still want to know what 20-year-olds are into. I still want to be into that kind of stuff, know about that stuff. Exactly the same. 65-year-olds, they want to know about what 45-year-olds are into. So they always skews younger. So there's no point in us sort of, doing big items about slippers for them because they're not going to be interested. ABC ones, what does that mean? This is the advertising thing that people used to use to sort of break people into different groups. Essentially what it means for us is probably people who've been through some kind of higher education, right? And that's the available audience. That is not us being elitist, just the perception is all the other groups are really well catered for, and there's no point in us competing for them because we're not going to be able to compete. We're a speech station, it's not necessarily what people want. Family orientated. Now this goes into a bit of analysis that was done a few years ago. That audience, and our potential audience, its family is a really, really important thing to them, okay? We discovered this actually, this goes across nearly all sort of age groups, but it's not this sort of really simple sort of understanding of family. So it's not, mum, dad and the 2 kids. It's the whole big, messy, modern family. It's, extended families that you might live with. And it might be the fact that you're having to look after elderly parents who are not very well. It might be the fact that you don't see your kids because you've split up from, your partner. All the different aspects of it. Okay, so it's not a simple thing, but it does. No matter that, people still care about family. Right. Oh, actually, that's not that point. So, actually, I was going to say is bearing that in mind. It might give you a sort of vague clue as to what we might have chosen for the programme. This is, these are the additional ideas that we also had for the programme. So we don't just do the phone in, we also have the rest between 10 and 12 o'clock that we have to fill it as well. And this gives you a good idea of the different things that we might do in the programme, because a lot of this is stupid. But people just chuck everything up on the board just in case it sticks. Because sometimes you've got a programme which is grindingly, it could be full of like cancer victims and you don't know what the phone is going to be. So sometimes you need items about sausages. So if you look at this, we didn't do most of these. I'll hasten to add. Bed bugs are on the rise. What can you do about it? Okay, sausages are quieter than they used to be. Do we know why? It's because what was it? We didn't do that on Saturday, okay? They're quieter because they've got less water in them, they're better quality. A potential at picking up, there was a big online reaction to, and actually a press reaction to a transgender. It wasn't a programme actually on CBBC, it was an online thing that they'd done, and it was classic Daily Mail, Daily Express thing. Can you believe what the BBC are doing, telling our kids that they should all be transgender? Wet wipes, don't flush them. It's an information piece. These didn't make it, by the way. Danish man is the largest landowner in Scotland. Who is he? Now that is a classic news analysis one. Who is this guy who owns all this land? It is a thing about just explaining to people who owns the land in Scotland. Where's it best to buy? Where's it best to rent? That was a thing about different cities in Scotland. I think Glasgow was the best place to rent, and Aberdeen was the worst place. I can't remember exactly. Disability benefit consultation. How is it best to support people into work, I should say? That's quite a serious one. And Brian Menteith is a famous, well-known rather, journalist, and he said we need more independent MPs in Scotland. What he meant by that, independent-minded MPs, so people who would speak their mind rather than just do what the party's telling them to do, and he felt Scotland needed a lot more of that. Now, Brian Menteith is not an SNP supporter, so there's an agenda there, but I think we've thought, maybe be interested to look at what do independent politicians do. People are not affiliated to parties. Right. So what did we do? So this is, trying to get to this, bearing in mind what we know, who the audience are, who we think our audience are, so that is 45 plus, BBC Ones, family orientated. What did we do as our phone in, and what did we do as our additional item, right? So I've explained who we think the audience are. What do we think we actually did? If you remember the items that we had. So, where were we? Any guesses?
I feel like we did the heavy movie therapy.
Why do you like that?
Because people in family oriented, they'll be like, oh, there's junkies on the streets and one of my kids, so maybe I do that. So.
Okay.
That's why. And everyone seems to be running about on the internet right now. It's like a lot. Like it's all on big sleeves.
Anybody else? Any other guesses?
Do we need to?
The football one,
The football one.
just because it's a massive sport, so you've got a lot of audience already within sport, so no way.
Yep.
I still think it's the one that's usually your kid alone if it's more family oriented.
Yeah.
And why do you think that? Because it's family oriented?
Yeah, it's going to drum up more conversation.
Any other thoughts?
I think I'd rule out, I think all of them equally, but I'd rule out the Winston Trump one.
Why would you rule it out?
Just because I thought there's too much on it, and if you're trying to be like, for your age range, obscure, trying to not to be news, and like analyse news, kind of like what the purpose of the show is. I think that'd be the one that sort of stands out as being used rather than analysing news.
The opponent very often is of the news, but that's a good point. Were you going to say something?
I mean, that's probably going to say more than Clinton versus Trump.
Do you think we should do the Clinton versus Trump?
Only because
That's fine.
it's alright, maybe.
I know we had a huge argument about this on Monday because I was there.
That age range is likely to know the most about it out of any demographic in the country because they're more likely to watch the news and listen to the news on the radio as well. So they're more likely to have a more informed opinion on it.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Maybe the doing talk to our children more because if the 45 audience is sort of in that 25 mindset, but they might have children, that they would still want to interact with the sort of newer aspects of social media, but still being family orientated.
45-year-olds would have roughly like a 10-year-old kid.
Yeah, so they might be on.
Something like that, like kind of average.
They might well do, yeah.
Like it's easy for a 45-year-old to have a 12-year-old kid.
I've got an 11-year-old now. Okay. Yeah, we do a lot of stuff about that, and it's interesting saying about 45-year-old kids. A lot of the stuff that we pitch, we think about grandkids, people who are grandparents are actually looking after their kids. And a lot of things we maybe do about social media is actually explaining just what it is and why your kids might be into it.
What is
Right, now hopefully, if I can get this to work, if there's any audio, this is the exciting reveal, okay? We'll get to hear. We'll figure it out.
It's going to be football, isn't it?
Good morning, this is Kay Adams with you till 12. Happy Halloween. It is Monday, October the 31st, so we're going to keep things spooky. We've got the man who had a light bulb moment while pulling a dead pigeon out of a gutter, the TV presenter who got dogs abuse from some very scary pop fans, and we will try to ease the horrors of being a saver when interest rates are at a historic low. Do you need any advice? Our special clinic will be open just after 10. Get in touch by phone or text on 80295. Also tell us when you first left your child home alone. Senior Conservative Michael Gove has caused controversy by leaving his 11-year-old in a B&B. Rachel Johnson was on his side on yesterday's Andrew Marr show.
Can I just say in their defence, the only reason their son was babysitting their 2 dogs.
So it's the dogs.
The dogs, yeah. Exactly, so they left the dogs as well.
Well, it's a difficult decision for any parent. The law gives little guidance. Tell us about your first time. Before that, what do you make of the proposal to make Glasgow the first city in the UK to have injecting rooms for registered drug addicts? 0500 92 95 00 is the number to call.
So yeah, the actual phone in, and we finally did it, was injecting rooms. But we did the Gove one as well, because it fitted perfectly with, as I was explaining, the kind of family orientation of our audience. Why did we do fixed rooms over there? It was Clinton versus Trump, right? Very often the way you get to the end of a process is by eliminating things. Clinton versus Trump, people are really engaged with, but we know that the actual election is happening on Tuesday. We'll have a result at 5 AM on Wednesday morning. It was keeping our powder dry. We are doing it on Wednesday. We thought there was a good chance we might well do it again this week. As it turned out, we didn't do it again this week. However, we've done it a lot. But the other thing is that it's not a UK election. I think people are very interested in it, but they don't necessarily see it as directly affecting your life. And what we want for the phone-in is not necessarily just get people on with opinions. This is what I think about this, so what I think about that. The strongest thing is people sharing personal experiences. So very often what you will look for are those personal experiences. And that, I was explaining earlier, is our audience are predominantly male. But in actual fact, if you want to get more female listeners, it's about storytelling. It's about getting those personal experiences. And we do want to get more female listeners. So that's one of the reasons we wouldn't necessarily do Trump. The other thing that a lot of people presume is that with our phone in is we ought to be doing politics. You know, whatever's happening in politics, that's what you should be doing. But we've got a lot of evidence that if you look at our audience figures, is that we don't do brilliantly during election periods. And very often what happens is that we will, as a whole station, we will hammer on about politics from 6 till 9 o'clock. Every news programme does it. A lot of the listeners are actually probably quite weary. And by the time they get to 9 o'clock, they fancy something else. A lot of the listeners also, they don't necessarily like listening to a total binary debate where you've got one side arguing against the other and it's very heated. They've got no particular input into it and it's not necessarily what they want to hear. So we do a lot of politics because it's part of our job is to reflect the opinions of the country, but it's not an automatic default. And I think a lot of people expect that to be the case, and we do get a lot of criticism for not picking up every single political thing as well. Children were anxious about social media. I'll be honest, we all thought that was a bit wishy-washy, that one. We didn't we had better options on the board anyway that we would do. Gore leaves his 11-year-old child alone. We did do that, right? And we did it later in the programme. It's because we thought, that's fine, we'll do it later in the programme. It's a good one. It could have been a phone-in. We could have done it as a phone-in, but we decided not to do it. We did it later. But as I said, the whole programme, although we didn't go to air saying this is a phone-in, it was an item. But as I said, the whole programme ought to be a conversation. So you're always inviting people to communicate with us and let us know what happened. So that we did put that on the Facebook page, and it got a good response as well. Offensive behaviour at football, we did it the next day, and it was a cracker, and it worked really well for us, and it was one of those timing ones. That was Monday's programme. We knew the debate was at I think it was a Wednesday was the actual debate, so we could wait, and we did it another day, and it went really well for us. So we did fixed rooms and shooting galleries, and exactly, almost word for word for those reasons, is that we wanted, people are anxious about these things, so we wanted to reflect that and put it on here. But it was also, it's one of these ones where, it's one of my favourite type of phone-ins, that what you do is you go to air with the sort of thing that people are automatically quite outraged by. So if you say, hey, they're going to have these special rooms, and people say, what are they doing? You get these angry people will phone up and say, you're spending money on junkies and drug addicts, and when we should be building hospitals and things like this. And it's a narrative that I love. Is you get phones ring up, you automatically get that, the texts in particular, people are raging. But what also comes through is very often you get a few personal stories. So what we did during that programme was we got somebody phoned up and said, oh, my brother died. He died on the street. You know, it was a tragedy. And you get somebody who's maybe a worker who works with people who've got addiction problems. And they'll say, well, you know, what do we want? Do we want them just to die, or do we want to, you know, these people are human beings as well. You know, they need some kind of social care as well, social support. So, and if you, it's really, I love it, is watching text coming in. And it starts off with rage, then it quiets down, then you'll get a lot more supportive towards the end of it. And you get these unique, this is a really interesting one, because we get some great callers in that. And in actual fact, TV News picked up on that. They asked us, oh, can you phone those people and ask them if they're happy to be on television? We said yes. So we actually built in that unique stories that you wouldn't necessarily get if you just go through traditional sort of, you know, news sort of outlets. I thought you were going to say something.
I've actually seen this post that's been going about Facebook, and it's like got like loads and loads of shares, and the guy basically says on it that he was like, if they can't quit cold turkey, then they should just die because it's their own fault for taking it in the first place. And so many people are sharing that, and it's just nuts how angry people are on both sides of it, when it's not really, it's kind of like a trivial thing, like it's not really going to affect that many people that they know that personally. Why?
This is one of the things that still works about our programme, is that, you know, very often social media, you only hear the stuff that you kind of want to hear, that people share, who've got similar views to you. That with our programme, we try to be as balanced as possible, so you'll hear things that probably you don't like, well, these junkies are phoning up and saying they should have these things. So in actual fact, for a lot of our listeners, although they're very angry to begin with, so maybe shut up about this. So what are you going to say?
Do you have a kind of sort of formatted title of, like, say you get 5 responses and you get the guys like, why was everybody on junkies? You get the guy who's lost his brother, and then you get the guy who feels sympathetic. Is there a schedule that you likely need to adapt to? Right, we're going to start off with the angry guy, then we're going to have the sob story, and then like, how does it work when you get, obviously you get phone-ins and you're trying to sort them out so quickly, but obviously phone-ins coming in as you're sorting them?
We're quite rare. We're well resourced compared to other programmes, in that we do have a production team. So before we go on air with the phone, we don't just go on air and just say, oh, whoever phones up gets on. We'll set up probably 2, maybe 3 guests in advance. So you're like, well, what is the balance of this story? And that was quite clear. So before we went on air, we'd set up who I think maybe didn't think it was the right way to spend the money. It was an ex-policeman who was very dubious about the legality of it. He wasn't sort of rabid, Daily Mail sort of, editorial writer or something like that. However, he was quite balanced in it. We also had a drug worker as well. I think we maybe had an academic set up for that as well. So we know before we go in here, we've got certain areas covered. We won't always use those experts or pre-set up people, because if you get that from real people, then you don't need it. So for instance, the person who phoned up and said his brother died, that just happened by chance. And what actually happened during that phone-in was it must have got around the sort of the community of academics and people who work with drug addictions, because we had like 2 ex-policemen phoned in. This was so Ian Oliver, who used to be the head of Grampian Police, he's like a European sort of wide renowned expert on drug addiction. He phoned in as well with other people phoning in. In actual fact, it went so well, that phone in, we didn't run it till 10, we ran it right through until 10:30, because we kept getting amazing stuff, and we totally changed the entire restaurant running order. So the stuff that you heard Kate talking about, we'll be doing this and we'll be doing that, half of that was binned, we didn't get to it. But that's the other thing as well, is with our programme, you always go, we were talking earlier about how important it is having that conversation. So you always go with what's working with that conversation, what do you get back from the listener, and you let that dictate what the rest of the running order is going to be. So you might have spent hours researching and setting up something, but you can bin it. So
do you ever use the rest of the running order for the next day? I know you might do you ever?
Sometimes you do it. It depends if you think it's going to be relevant the next day. That's a really interesting thing. Is that producers love you for that. If you're the next day's producer and something's overran, and you think actually you can have it and it works for the next day, it's absolutely brilliant. But it saves you hours of work because it's hard work setting this stuff up. Any other questions?
Is there anything that's kind of you've been turned to, like from like you said, like the shooting gallery run, like it's been on for so long as well, or is it like moving slowly so you've returned to them because they've been so successful?
Yeah, we're doing one on Monday actually, which is ME, which I don't know if you know it. It's also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, and we did. It was quite a small item a few weeks ago. I think it was an awareness day. Maybe we had somebody on. And it was like a classic thing, if you've got that experience, phone and let us know. And we got a massive response, a really strong response, but it was very angry people. And it was one of these things that I don't know if you know about it. It's a much more common condition, and you might well know somebody who suffers from it. But there's a lack of recognition which came through. People say, oh, nobody believes that there's anything actually wrong with me. They just think I'm lazy. They think I'm a malingerer. I don't get any support from the NHS or the health services. And there was a new treatment that had come out, and the idea was if you take more exercise, then you will feel better. And they had sort of examples of some people who'd done this. But there was people who've got, ME, and this is ridiculous. This is people just saying, just shut up, stop moaning about it. So we got this huge response, really strong personal stories. People were very emotional about it. And we only had, it's one of those classic things in live radio, you've only got until the hour, because you almost never take anything across the news. We ran that up until 12 o'clock. We can't stop the next programme, you can't stop the midday news. So we knew at that point there's more to tell about that. So we are returning to that on Monday. We've got some more really good personal stories, and we've got an international angle on it as well. We've got a woman from New York who's coming on to tell us a bit about it and the treatments that you get there. Anything else you want to ask me just about BBC in general? I'll make things up for you about in general.
You were talking earlier about, like, I remember James talking about this last week as well, how that sense of narrative and conversation becomes important. Could you just quickly recap what you were saying to me down the canteen about the guy with the snip?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I forgot that was an item we did last week actually. This is maybe something we can talk about. It was a diabetic man who we did an item on last week, and he was due to get his lower leg amputated. And he was waiting to go in to get his operation, but it got cancelled, right? So what he decided to do was, do you want to do the voice? He was from North Devon, and he'd got this voice, it was cancelled. So he thought, I'm not waiting for my operation. So and he was on the radio, he had his perfect story. He said, so what I did, Ken, is I just went down to the chemist's, I bought a pair of nail clippers, I went home, and it was long, huge long description. He said I went home because it was stinking, Ken. It had burst open. It was like cat food, it was. It's like, oh, it's horrible. Anyway, got the clippers. He was this ex-army guy. He's all very matter of fact. Cut my toes off myself, right? So he did that. And then this took 20 minutes. It was an absolutely brilliant story. Worked great for us, And the thing is, he told the story. He went back into hospital after doing this, right? Finally got his operation, went back in, and whoever the surgeon was looking at him and said, do you know what? We're not going to chop your leg off because what you've done's okay. We'll leave it and see what happens. This is the thing I didn't mention to you, is that I was talking about my job at the beginning, because I'm called senior content producer, right? Because I'm not called senior radio producer. It's content, because a big part of what we do, it's not just radio. We do a lot of online stuff, we do a lot of visualizations as well. And that story in particular, because what we did is we made a short video, just using, he sent us pictures of his toe, lots of them. So we made a little bit of video of that with the audio that we got from him. We put that on our Facebook page, and it went massive for us. It's one of the biggest things that we've done in weeks. But it's that kind of classic thing. You can do loads of work, really, worthy work and look into politics. But in actual fact, the thing that gets you the biggest engagement, by far the most views and shares, is the story of a guy chopping his own toes off, basically.
Do you run any sort of delay in the phones?
No. I don't think anybody uses phone delays. We used to have phone delays back in the 90s, and the worry was that you had this delay in case people swore on air. And that was a big anxiety, as you didn't want to sort of upset your listeners. But in actual fact, if you're using a delay, technically you're not a live programme. And if you're not a live programme, that shifts the legal responsibility of what is said on the programme. So if somebody says something which is defamatory, or in actual fact is in contempt of court, because you're not live, that responsibility actually lies with the programme makers. Whereas one of the things you probably covered actually is the live defence. It is a great defence page as well. It was within the context of a live programme and you couldn't see it happening. So, I mean, if your worry is, on the one hand, okay, you don't want people swearing on air, but you really, really do not want to be in contempt of court, and you do not want people suing you either as well. So, the delay is gone. I don't think anybody uses the delay, actually. Plus, the delay sounds awful because it takes little digital bites out of your stream and it gives you this weird tinny sound. What was that?
I said it's also very funny when people swear.
Yeah, you're right. But this is the thing as well, is that people do swear, and I don't think they hold the broadcaster responsible for it. I used to work in a programme called the Macaulay & Co programme, and we did programmes every year from the Edinburgh Festival, and you get loads and loads of comedians on. And very often, we were on at 9 o'clock in the morning, and very often we'd come on and they were still like solidly drunk from the previous night, or drunk or whatever actually. And if anybody's, and it did happen, people did swear in the programme, but the audience were absolutely black affronted. They weren't black affronted with us. They would boo the person who'd sworn in the programme. And they were like, because you get people going on, I can't believe the reaction I'm getting from the audience. But they'd be like, this, how dare you swear? And the interesting thing, that's an Edinburgh Festival audience, right? The previous night, they would have been out, seeing lots of comedy, things that had a lot of swearing in it and a lot of extremely adult content. However, they got the context. You don't swear in morning radio. If you do swear, it's your fault. That's...
Any other questions, folks?
What would you say the biggest, in terms of content, in terms of the show, what is the biggest piece you've ever done that you thought, I'm proud that we've done that?
This programme.
Apart from the guy cutting off his toes, obviously.
Did good business for us on Facebook, that one. I think it's more a body of work rather than just an individual thing. And it was very recently. Kerm's programme's only actually been in existence for a year and a half. But I think at the time of the Brexit vote, when we got the result in, and we went 7 days a week at that point with the phone because there was so much to talk about. And it was one of these unique moments that, basically sort of culture and political history of the country. And I think it felt like you were doing important work, actually reflecting what people were thinking and feeling. And it was one of those moments where there isn't an agenda, there isn't a precedent for what happened. So it was very raw. People were very upset. and people were also extremely happy about it as well. And it was a very emotional programme that you put on air. And we did that across 7 days after that. I mean, we worked really, really hard, but it felt like it was you were part of it, you know, big historical events, and it felt like you needed to have a phone in for people to share their views, and they're real people to share their views, not just politicians and commentators as well.
Just quickly on that, Stephen, if we think back to the Scottish referendum when the Kate Adams show at the time, or sorry, called Kate at the time, do you think you got a greater kind of emotional response to the Brexit one as opposed to the Scottish referendum then?
I wasn't actually working on the programme. I just think Kate wasn't actually doing it was morning calls, so she only did the Fridays at that point. I think the Brexit Gate got us a much stronger emotional response, actually. I think over the whole campaign, the Scottish referendum was more emotional, but the actual result, the Brexit one, was a huge reaction to us. I think people were really shocked by the Brexit. I think they just didn't see it coming. The actual campaign for Brexit, I don't think people were particularly engaged with. You know, because we go to air with phone-ins about it, and you didn't get a massive response. The Scottish referendum, we got a massive response, and I think we did that for about 10 days in a row, running up to the actual vote on that day.
Okay, folks. Well, Stephen, thank you for your talk. It's very interesting. Thank you. So I hope you've also got kind of insight to what I found interesting was, you know, I listened to the show, I always assumed it'd be a majority female audience. I don't know why that is.
But that is the target.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's got I kind of maybe associate Kay with most women as well from her time on there. I'm a grandparent, so it ticks that box as well for me. But so, you know, interesting to see, and a lot of this ties back into what James was talking about last week about that sense of engagement. You know, for those of you who are doing a creative piece as your major thing, that's the thing, be it factual, be it fiction, it's how you engage that audience. And as Steve said as well, trying to identify that audience, you know, how you, and I know we've been telling you that since year one, but it's something you cannot say enough, you know, identifying the audience, making a connection with them, and stories, you know, whether it's factual or not, people love stories because they like to think of how they can personalise it. People who know in a similar situation. I'm diabetic, so when Stephen's telling me about and we've got family history of amputations, when he's talking about this guy cutting his toes off, I'm kind of thinking, could I do that? You know, that. So that's what you're looking for. Remember, you're not doing it to please yourself. You're doing it, you know, to please and engage with your audience.